My name is Cynthia Balling. I'm 29, and I used to believe honesty was the simplest thing in the world. You either told the truth or you didn't. There weren't shades, loopholes, or polite omissions that somehow still counted as not lying. At least that's what I believed until Barry. Barry had a talent for shaping words until they sounded harmless. He said things like, "I just didn't mention it with a smile so easy, you'd forget to ask what it was." I used to think his charm came from confidence. Now I know it came from control. When we met 3 years ago, I was the quiet one. Calm, organized, deliberate. He was light itself, the kind of man who turned every room brighter, who made people laugh without effort. He said I made him feel grounded, that I was the calm after every storm. It sounded romantic at first, until I realized storms don't actually want to be grounded. They want to keep destroying things. Our life together wasn't flashy. I worked as a UX designer from home. He was in marketing, always half living through a glowing screen. Evenings were simple. I'd cook dinner, he'd pour wine, we'd talk about our days. Sometimes we'd watch shows curled up on the couch, sometimes walk along the park trail, fingers brushing together. It felt safe. And safe to me meant love. But lately, safe had started to feel like a performance. He began turning his phone face down when I walked by, laughing at messages he never shared. He'd say, "It's just the team group chat, babe. You'd be bored." Except his smile had that too perfect balance of warmth and distance. The kind that says, "I know you're suspicious, but I'll make you feel guilty for it." One Tuesday evening, while I was washing dishes, he leaned against the counter, scrolling through his emails. "Hey, forgot to tell you," he said casually. "Next weekend, I'm flying to Denver. Marketing retreat thing. Brand workshop. Corporate fun." He smirked, like even he didn't believe his own joke. "Denver," I asked, drying my hands. "Since when?" "Oh, just came up. 3-day deal. Don't worry, I'll still call you at night." He didn't look up from his screen once. His tone was rehearsed, too steady, like he'd already practiced this conversation. I wanted to ask who else is going. "Where are you staying? Why didn't I hear about this sooner?" But I swallowed the questions. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Instead, I smiled and said, "Have fun." When the morning came, I drove him to the airport. He kissed me on the cheek, just the cheek, and whispered, "You're the best, you know that." I nodded, pretending not to notice the missing words, "I love you." That weekend, the apartment felt too big. I tried not to think about him. I called my sister, even joined a friend for brunch. But on the third night, loneliness crawled in. I opened Instagram, scrolling through stories from mutual friends, not even sure what I was looking for. Then I froze. A photo, posted by Sophie, one of Barry's coworkers. They were on a rooftop bar, Denver skyline glowing behind them. And there, between Sophie's laughter and the city lights, sat Barry, his arm draped casually behind a woman's chair like it belonged there. Tessa, his ex. The caption read, "Reunited crew, now Denver nights, #old times." I didn't even feel my heartbeat at first, just a strange stillness, like every sound in the world had vanished. The phone slipped slightly in my hand. It wasn't the photo itself that hurt. It was how calm he looked. How comfortable. Like the lie wasn't new, it was practiced. I stared at the screen for a long time, tracing the pixels of his smile, the curve of her shoulder leaning closer to him. Then I locked my phone and sat on the couch, hands trembling but eyes dry. I thought of his words, "Don't worry, I'll still call you at night." He hadn't called, not once. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't scream. It whispers. It comes wrapped in routines, in excuses, in sentences that start with, "Don't make this a big deal." And somewhere between those little lies and your silence, love turns into something unrecognizable. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the balcony, stared at the city lights below, and whispered the sentence that would echo for weeks afterward. He didn't lie. He just didn't tell me. And for the first time, I understood that omission can be louder than deceit. The wind brushed my hair across my face, cold against the tear that finally escaped. Inside, the apartment glowed softly under the lamp. He'd once said made the place feel warm. Now, it just illuminated the emptiness he left behind. I turned off the light. And in the darkness, I started to plan the truth he would never see coming. When Barry came back from his work retreat, he was glowing. That was the first thing I noticed. His skin had that sun-kissed sheen you only get from days outdoors, not from conference rooms. His hair looked freshly trimmed, and he walked into the apartment, humming Suitcase rolling behind him like a trophy. Hey, he said, smiling wide. Miss me. I forced a soft laugh. Of course. He kissed my forehead, not my lips. I could smell citrus and something floral perfume that wasn't mine. How was Denver? I asked as he poured himself a glass of water. Productive. Long days, boring presentations, he said, eyes fixed on his phone. You know how those retreats are. Team building, forced fun. Yeah, I murmured. I've heard. He didn't look up, and that told me everything I needed to know. After his shower, he came out in a white t-shirt, hair damp, scrolling through messages. He flopped onto the couch beside me, close enough to touch, but miles away in presence. I waited. I wanted to see if he'd tell me, if he'd mention her. He didn't, so I said it for him. How's Tessa doing these days? His hand froze mid-scroll. What? I met his eyes. Tessa, your ex, looked like a nice rooftop bar in Denver. The silence stretched thin between us. He blinked once. Then, like someone who'd practiced a script, he exhaled and leaned back. Oh my God, Cynthia, you're not serious. I am, I said quietly. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. We ran into each other. Pure coincidence. You're really blowing this up for no reason. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed calm. You never mentioned she'd be there. He set his phone down, rubbing his temples like I was exhausting him, because it wasn't a big deal. One drink, Cynthia. We caught up, that's all. I didn't lie to you. I tilted my head. You just didn't tell me. He looked relieved, almost proud. Exactly. The words sat between us, sharp and poisonous. He didn't hear how they sounded, but I did. I heard the arrogance of someone who thought truth was optional. You didn't think I deserved to know I asked. He sighed. You would have overreacted. I was trying to avoid a scene. I stared at him for a long time. You avoided honesty, I said softly, not conflict. He stood up, pacing. This is ridiculous. You're acting like I cheated or something. I didn't say you did. Then what's the problem? The problem, I said, is that you made a choice for both of us and called it kindness. He turned to me, frustration rising. You're impossible. You twist everything I say. I almost smiled. No, Barry. You twist everything you say. I just finally stopped untwisting it for you. His jaw tightened. Maybe if you trusted me. Trust goes both ways, I interrupted, calm, deliberate. You can't hide things and then blame me for not trusting you. He ran a hand through his hair. You're overthinking again. I looked at him, this man I'd once thought I'd marry, and saw a stranger rehearsing a defense, not a partner seeking forgiveness. Something inside me shifted, small but irreversible. A click, like the sound of a lock turning. That night I lay beside him in bed. His breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine wasn't. The ceiling above me felt closer than usual, pressing down. I replayed every moment of our conversation, every expression, every word. And what haunted me most wasn't his lie, it was how easily he'd told it, how natural deceit felt rolling off his tongue. He mumbled something in his sleep, smiling faintly. I turned away, pulling the blanket tighter, as if distance could mute the echo of his voice. You're overreacting. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. It looped in my head until it became a heartbeat. By morning, the decision was there, quiet and solid. I would leave. Not dramatically, not in fury, just quietly. Because some exits don't need doors slamming. Sometimes the silence itself is enough to say I'm done. Over breakfast, he acted like nothing happened. He complimented the coffee, scrolled through news, asked about my work project. I smiled back, played along. When he left for the office, I watched from the window as his car pulled away. The street below shimmered in sunlight, and for the first time in months, I felt the smallest flicker of relief. That afternoon, I opened my laptop not to work, but to search. Rental listings, one-bedroom apartments, short-term leases, quiet neighborhoods. A new start hidden in a browser tab he'd never see. I bookmarked one that caught my eye. Bright windows, hardwood floors, a tiny balcony facing west. Peaceful. Mine. As I closed the laptop, my reflection ghosted faintly across the screen. I didn't look broken, just awake. In the kitchen, his empty mug sat on the counter. I washed it, dried it carefully, and placed it back on the shelf, like returning something borrowed that I no longer wanted. He thought the lie ended when I stopped arguing. But the truth was just beginning to take shape, wordless, patient, and waiting for me to follow it. I didn't know what freedom looked like yet, but I knew what it didn't look like. And it didn't look like him. It's strange how silence can become routine. After that night, Barry and I stopped arguing, not because things were fixed, but because something in me had gone quiet. I no longer felt the urge to convince him of anything. You can't reason someone out of a lie they built to live in. Days blurred together. He talked. I listened less. He reached for me. I didn't reach back. He didn't notice at first, or maybe he pretended not to. Long day, he'd ask, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. The longest I'd reply with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. He'd kiss the top of my head, and I'd stand still, body present, mind already elsewhere. At night, he'd scroll through his phone until midnight, the screen's glow flickering across his face like a confession he didn't realize I could see. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the darkened window, someone detached, foreign, no longer waiting to be chosen. The next morning, I began my quiet escape. I started with the smallest things. My old sketchbook, a pair of sneakers I rarely wore, then my favorite mug, the one he never noticed missing because he never made coffee for me. When he asked about the missing clutter, I smiled. Just decluttering. You know me can't stand mess. He chuckled, not suspecting a thing. Why would he? I'd spent years making him comfortable. Every night while he slept, I'd sit in the living room and look around. The framed photos on the wall, our trip to Seattle, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. The throw blanket he insisted on buying. The fake plant I used to water by habit. Every piece of our life together now looked like set dressing props from a play I was done performing. Somewhere between exhaustion and relief, I realized the truth. I wasn't leaving because of one lie. I was leaving because I'd stopped recognizing myself in the reflection he loved. The night before I left, he made dinner pasta with garlic bread, his attempt at effort. Music played softly from his phone. He poured us both wine, smiling like the past few weeks hadn't happened. To him, they probably hadn't. Can we just move past this? He asked halfway through the meal. I hate feeling like you're still mad. I'm not mad, I said. Then what? I set my fork down carefully. I'm just done. He blinked, then laughed, awkward, disbelieving. Done with what? With pretending. His smile faltered. You're being weird lately. Did something happen? I met his eyes. Yeah, you happened. He looked genuinely hurt for a second, then the mask slipped back on. You're really throwing everything away because I didn't tell you about one stupid drink. I didn't answer. I just stood, carried my plate to the sink, and rinsed it under cold water. He kept talking voice-rising questions, tumbling after me. I dried my hands, turned off the light, and walked past him. He called my name once. I didn't look back. That night, I lay beside him again. He fell asleep easily, as always. But I stayed awake, eyes tracing the shadows on the ceiling, memorizing the shape of a place that had already stopped feeling like home. Before dawn, I rose quietly. The air felt heavy, charged with finality. I dressed, zipped my duffel bag, and walked to the doorway. For a moment, I almost left a note, something short, something kind. But then I remembered his words. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you. So I folded the paper back into the drawer and whispered to the room. Then I won't tell you either. By the time the sun rose, I was gone. When he woke up, I imagined he still smelled coffee in the air, still heard the echo of my footsteps in the hall. Maybe he thought I'd gone to work early. Maybe he thought nothing at all. I didn't check my phone for hours. When I finally did, there were 3 missed calls. Then a text. Hey, where are you? Thought you were working from home today. Did you take your stuff somewhere? Half your closet's empty. Cynthia, what the hell is going on? What the hell is? I didn't reply. By then, I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment, bare walls, echoing space sunlight streaming through uncurtained windows. The air smelled like paint and possibility. For the first time in years, there was no tension humming beneath my ribs, no waiting for his next explanation, no deciphering half-truths disguised as kindness. Just quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that hurts. It was the kind that heals, the kind that says, you did it, you got out. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Another text. We need to talk. This isn't funny. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I turned it over, face down exactly the way he used to. A poetic symmetry, I thought. He'd hidden his truth from me once. Now I was hiding my peace from him. He would call it running away. I would call it walking toward myself. And if he ever asked why I left without saying goodbye, I'd tell him the truth. He said he didn't lie, so I decided not to tell him either. The silence lasted 4 days. 4 whole days, without his name lighting up my phone. No messages, no calls, no "where did you go" posts. Just quiet until the 5th morning, when the world reminded me that peace never stays unbothered for long. My phone buzzed at 9:12 a.m. with a message from a mutual friend. Hey, Cynthia, have you seen Barry's stories? I hadn't. I'd unfollowed him the night I left, not out of spite, but self-preservation. But curiosity, it's a cruel thing. It whispers, just one look. So I looked. There he was. A filtered selfie at a wine bar. That familiar half smile carefully rehearsed. Captioned, Sometimes you have to let insecure people remove themselves so real love can find you. Insecure. There it was again, his favorite word when truth cornered him. Another story followed a boomerang of him clinking glasses with coworkers. Caption. No explanations needed when you have nothing to hide. And then one more, a quote, graphic in neutral beige tones. Growth is choosing peace, even if it costs you people who misunderstand you. He was performing calmness, curating the narrative, turning himself into the victim of my escape. I should have been angry, but mostly I felt tired of the theater, tired of how easily he could rebrand pain as self-awareness. He was doing what he always did, rewriting reality, until even he believed it. I set the phone down, exhaled, and looked around my new apartment. It was still mostly empty. A mattress on the floor, 2 cardboard boxes stacked as a coffee table, my laptop sitting beside a cup of cold tea. But it felt more alive than any place I'd shared with him. For the first time, my thoughts weren't being edited for someone else's comfort. I could just exist, messy, uncertain healing. That evening, I lit a candle, cooked pasta, and played old jazz on low volume. No background tension, no unspoken questions, just the sound of rain tapping against the window and the gentle hum of my own solitude. When my phone buzzed again, I ignored it. But it buzzed a second time, and a third. I sighed and finally flipped it over. Barry. So you're just done. No explanation. Unbelievable how fast you gave up. At least I didn't sneak around and lie like you did. I stared at the screen, the irony so thick I almost laughed. He couldn't stand that I hadn't given him a scene, that I'd left him nothing to argue with. He needed my reaction to feed the story he was spinning. But I wasn't playing anymore, so I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another message came through. You'll regret this. You'll realize no one else will ever love you like I did. That one made me smile, because for once he was right. I didn't want anyone to love me like that ever again. Over the next few weeks, his online posts shifted. The bravado faded. The captions turned from triumphant to bitter. Funny how people can walk away like you never meant anything. Some people mistake silence for guilt. They'll regret losing you one day. I didn't respond. I didn't even watch the stories anymore. He was shouting into an empty theater, and I had already left the show. Instead, I filled the quiet with things that were mine again. Mornings started with sunlight and coffee, not tension and suspicion. I picked up running, something I'd stopped because Barry said it made me too obsessed with structure. I called friends I hadn't seen in months. One of them cried when I showed up at her doorstep. You look lighter, she said. I feel lighter, I admitted. At night, when loneliness crept in, I'd sit on the balcony wrapped in a blanket watching the city below. There was a different kind of peace there, not absence but presence, like I was finally inhabiting my own life again. And yet some nights I'd still think of him, not with longing, but curiosity, how someone could build a version of you so false and still sleep peacefully beside it. I wondered if he'd ever realize that lying isn't just about words, it's about omission tone, the silence that manipulates more than speech ever could. One evening I got another message, this one quieter. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things ended. I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. It's okay, I'm not angry. His reply came fast. You sound so cold. Just calm, I answered. Minutes later, another bubble appeared. Can we meet just to talk? There's nothing left to talk about. He didn't like that. You're acting like I cheated. I made one mistake, Cynthia. I know, I wrote back. I made mine too. I stayed. I hit send and felt something release inside me, like the final thread snapping cleanly apart. That night, I slept through the entire night for the first time in months. No twisting thoughts, no imagined explanations, just quiet breathing, steady and full. By morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window, soft and forgiving. I brewed coffee, took a sip, and smiled at the taste. It was too strong, a little bitter, imperfect. But it was mine. He could keep his curated captions, his audience, his pity. I had something far rarer. Peace. And peace, I learned, doesn't need to announce itself. It just waits until you're ready to hear it. 2 months passed before I saw him again. By then, the sting had dulled into something quieter. A faded ache that only hummed when the world went still. I'd settled into my new apartment. The walls no longer echoed, my plants had stopped dying, and the nights didn't feel so heavy anymore. Sometimes I still caught myself glancing at my phone before bed, expecting a message that never came. But the space where his name used to appear felt less like a wound and more like a scar, a reminder of healing already underway. Then one afternoon, fate, or irony, decided to play its cruel little joke. I was standing in line at a cafe downtown waiting for my iced coffee when I heard his voice, low, familiar, like a song you'd forgotten you knew every word to. I turned, and there he was. Barry? He looked different, smaller somehow. The glow he used to carry had dimmed. His shirt was wrinkled hair, unkempt eyes tired. The confident smirk he once wore like armor had been replaced by a tight, hesitant smile. Cynthia. His voice wavered just enough for me to know he hadn't expected to see me either. Hey, I said softly, keeping my tone even. We stood there surrounded by strangers and espresso steam, that awkward silence stretching between us. He gestured toward an empty table. Do you have a minute? Part of me wanted to say no, to walk away and let that be the end of it. But closure is a strange thing. Sometimes you have to look a ghost in the eye to make sure it's really dead. So I nodded. We sat down across from each other, the table small enough that our knees almost touched. He fiddled with his cup eyes, darting everywhere but mine. You look good, he said finally. Different. Happier. I am. He gave a small laugh. So that's what peace looks like, huh? I smiled faintly. You tell me. You were the expert on peace, remember. Growth is choosing calm, even if it costs you people. His smile faltered. You saw that post. I saw them all. He looked embarrassed for the first time since I'd known him. Yeah, that was me trying to convince myself I was fine. And were you? He hesitated, then shook his head. No. The honesty caught me off guard. It didn't sound rehearsed this time. I thought if I said it enough I'd believe it, he continued. But everything just fell apart. Work's been a mess. Friends took sides. And Tessa... He stopped, eyes flicking up to gauge my reaction. I raised an eyebrow. Tessa. He exhaled, long and shaky. Yeah. We tried getting back together after you left. Didn't last. Turns out she's not who I thought she was. I almost laughed, not from cruelty, but disbelief. They usually aren't. He winced. Guess I deserve that. I shrugged. It's not about deserving Barry. It's about cause and effect. He leaned forward, voice softer now. I know I messed up, Cynthia. I know I hurt you. And I don't expect forgiveness. He paused, searching for words. I miss the way you made me feel. Safe. Like I could be myself. That word again. Safe. It used to sound like love. Now it just sounded like dependency. Barry, I said quietly. You didn't want safe. You wanted reassurance. You wanted to keep testing the boundaries of my forgiveness to make sure I'd never leave. That's not love. That's control, dressed as affection. His throat worked as he swallowed. You think that's all it was? I don't think I said. I lived it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt heavy, full of the ghosts of every conversation we never finished. Then he said, what if we tried again? Slowly. I've changed. I almost smiled at the déjà vu. You told her that too, didn't you? He blinked. What? When you got back together with Tessa, you said you'd changed, that things would be different. How did that work out? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't need to answer. The silence told me enough. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I said, voice calm. I just think you confuse regret with growth. Missing something isn't the same as becoming better. His eyes shimmered just a little. So that's it. You really don't want to try. Barry, you burned the bridge, I said softly. Then you stood there waiting for me to swim back. He gave a broken laugh, rubbing a hand across his face. You sound different, colder. No, I said, just clear. He stared down at his coffee, swirling the melting ice, avoiding my eyes. I thought if I apologized, you'd remember how good we were, he whispered. I do remember, I said, and for a moment my voice cracked. That's exactly why I won't go back. He looked up, eyes searching for something that wasn't there anymore. You really moved on, huh? I nodded. Yeah, I had to. He smiled sadly. I'm happy for you then. Thank you, I said, meaning it. When I stood to leave, he didn't stop me. He just watched that faint, lost expression softening into quiet acceptance. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. As I reached the door, I looked back once. He was sitting there alone, staring at the empty seat across from him. And in that moment, I realized something. For years, I'd thought I was the one waiting for him to be honest. But maybe he'd always been the one waiting for me to disappear. Outside, the late afternoon sun hit the pavement warm and gold. I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me settle for good. The ghost was finally gone. 6 months. That's how long it took for everything to come full circle. Half a year since I'd walked out of that apartment suitcase, half-packed, heart completely emptied. Half a year since I stopped explaining myself to someone who only listened to reply. And in that time, something miraculous happened. My life stopped orbiting around the wreckage he left behind. I didn't wake up thinking about what he might post. I didn't check my phone expecting closure that would never come. I simply lived. My new apartment began to look like me. There were sketches pinned to the walls, soft jazz on the weekends, a growing forest of plants that somehow survived my inconsistent watering. I even adopted a cat, a quiet gray one I named Nova. She followed me from room to room like a little shadow that didn't ask for more than company. Work was different too, freer. My boss noticed the change first. "Cynthia, you've been on fire lately," she'd said one morning during a meeting. "You ever think about leading a project yourself?" 6 months ago, I would have hesitated, worrying Barry would think I was too ambitious, too busy, too much. Now I just smiled and said yes. The project became a success, and for the first time in years, I saw my name on something that was mine alone. My own decisions, my own effort, my own peace. It's funny how love can make you forget the sound of your own voice, and how silence once feared becomes the melody you didn't know you were missing. Then, one Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in months. "Barry. Hey, can we please talk? Just 5 minutes. It's important." I stared at the screen. For a moment I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity, that old traitorous instinct, whispered again. Another message followed seconds later. "Please, Cynthia, I just need to see you. I'm at that coffee shop we used to go to." I could have ignored him. Probably should have. But some part of me wanted to see him one last time, not to reopen wounds, but to confirm they'd truly healed. So I went. He was sitting at our old table by the window nursing a half-empty cup. The once confident man looked smaller. His hair was longer, unkempt. His eyes carried the weight of someone who'd spent months bargaining with ghosts. "Hey," I said quietly, taking the seat across from him. He looked up, managing a weak smile. "You came." "For a few minutes." He nodded, staring down at his hands. "I'm not going to lie," he began. "Things haven't been great. Work's a mess. I lost focus. Ryan, my manager let me go last week." He paused, then added in, "Tessa left too. Said I made her feel invisible." I stayed silent. There was nothing I could say that life hadn't already told him. He continued, voice trembling slightly. "I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I can't stop thinking about what we had, how you made everything feel steady. I thought I wanted excitement, but all I did was destroy the only peace I ever had." That word again. Peace. He said it like it was a person he'd misplaced. "Barry," I said gently, "you didn't want peace. You wanted permission to keep breaking things and still feel loved for it." He looked at me like he didn't understand. Maybe he didn't. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. "You confuse comfort with goodness. You called me your calm, but what you really meant was your silence. You liked that I didn't challenge you, that I absorbed your chaos and called it love." His eyes glistened. "You make it sound like I'm a monster." "No," I said softly. "Just a man who never learned that love without honesty is just control in prettier language." He looked down again, his fingers tightening around the cup. "I just thought maybe we could start over," he said finally. "Go slow. I've changed." I studied him, his shoulders slumped, voice cracking at the edges. Maybe he had changed, but not for me and not enough. "You told her that too, didn't you?" His head snapped up. "What?" "When you got back together with Tessa, you said you'd changed, that it would work this time. How did that turn out?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," I said, my tone even, "but missing someone doesn't mean you've grown. Regret isn't redemption." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead his lips pressed into a thin line. "So that's it," he whispered. "You won't even try." I smiled sadly. "No, Barry. You burned the bridge, and then you waited for me to swim back across the ashes." He let out a soft laugh, bitter and tired. "You sound different." "I am different," I said, "because I finally started listening to myself." He blinked, hard tears threatening to spill. "I thought if I said sorry, you'd remember how good we were." "I do remember," I said. "That's why I'll never go back." For a moment, all I heard was the hum of the espresso machine, the clink of a spoon against porcelain, and the slow rhythm of closure settling in. He looked out the window, eyes red. "You really moved on, huh?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I had to." He nodded slowly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." "I already did," I said. "Myself." When I stood to leave, he didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the reflection of a woman who no longer belonged to his story. As I stepped out into the sunlight, the city buzzed around me, alive, unpredictable, unfiltered. For the first time, I didn't need to narrate my own pain. I didn't need to prove I'd healed. I simply was. Later that night, as I sat by the window with Nova curled in my lap, I scrolled back through old photos just once. Not to reminisce, but to remind myself of how far I'd come. Because healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without bleeding. If Barry ever tells this story, I know he'll spin it differently. He'll say I changed. He'll say I gave up. He'll say I stopped caring. And maybe he's right, because I did change. I gave up trying to fix someone who mistook silence for peace, and I stopped caring about being understood by the person who taught me the cost of misunderstanding myself. The truth is simple, I didn't change to hurt him. I changed to stop hurting myself. As I closed my eyes that night, the last line of our story wrote itself softly in my mind. Peace isn't loud.